The main challenges for mobility in Europe, but also worldwide, will be the oil dependency of transport, the congestion on transport infrastructure, and greenhouse gas emissions. In terms of the funding, I think that on the one hand, it's important to have a look at the way that the transport sector is being charged or taxed. I think it's important to do it in a smarter way that gives also better signals to users, so trying to have a stricter correlation between the actual use of the vehicles and of the infrastructure and the negative effects they produce. So,
could you give an example of?
Well, for instance, congestion charging means charging less when a vehicle is used off-peak. It means charging less a vehicle which is less polluting. So it's what we call the internalization of the externality. So trying to give a better correlation between prices and negative effects.
I don't believe we necessarily have a coherent national transportation policy vision per se. Mm-hmm. We have, like most countries, a very disparate a disaggregate policy-making apparatus, even at the federal level. Department of Energy can control energy policies somewhat. Transportation controls transportation policies. And
you don't think they speak to each other?
No, of course they do, yet they have their large apparatus, and they have only quite recently become much more cooperative, I think, and there's a few instances of seeing this play out in practice. Mm-hmm. But the other thing to consider is that, as I mentioned earlier, the concentration of the US population in metropolitan areas, those metropolitan areas consist of many, many local governments.
You seem to assume that addressing the issue means government addressing the issue. My view is that the history of government addressing issues is almost without exception one of unremitting failure. So therefore, I agree very much with Chris that I don't see much scope or likelihood for significant centralized government action on this. And it's not surprising why. The US is facing a unparalleled economic and financial crisis at the moment. Action, what you regard as action, would imply deepening that crisis, notwithstanding the possibilities in the medium and long term of new industries flourishing. In the short term, action would deepen that crisis.
In 1979, if I recall, there's quite a dated statistics, which is second year China opened up its economy and economic reform. Annual passenger car sales in 1979 was 10,000. So from 10,000 to 15 million and eventually to 30 million. So this is just, this is the intensity. China is going to slow the pace a little bit because financial sector liberalization at a faster pace, in my view, is much important priority, and I think it's very politically imprudent for policymakers to fight two battles simultaneously. So on that basis, I actually expect what you, John, just said, near-term issues probably are taking a center policy arena. Now, in terms of...
so you think that trying to build up a sustainable mobility will not be a priority?
Well, it's a priority in the medium-term run, but in the long run, but not in the short-term run.